Hello and welcome to the Wheel of Crime Podcast, the podcast that's ran by two ladies who play games, shout profanities, and laugh way too often. Also, this podcast does cover topics of sensitive nature, and as such, listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello, and welcome back to the Wheel of Crime podcast. My name is Jen.
My name is Emily, and welcome back, guys.
Welcome back, bitches.
We are gathered here today to discuss something very, very serious.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
And that is, Emily will tell you what that is.
It is that,
Have you ever had a dream?
Yeah,
and in your dream, in your dream.
Immediately, anybody who's starting off with listening to this episode as their first episode was like, yeah, it's been nice, guys, but like, what the fuck is this?
Click out.
I had something funny to say, like actually funny, and then, yeah, it left my brain. I don't know what happened, but that's okay. But yeah, well, Jen, we are gathered here today, this is true. But, we usually gather to do an episode, which I know you'll be telling a story today. But before we get there, what have you been up to lately? It's been a while since I've seen you. Have you been enjoying your summer?
Yeah, summer's been great. I've been living my dream, working every day, in and out. Just kidding. No, I don't know. I'm just chilling. I'm starting up my tennis lessons soon. I have tennis lessons in like all of September and October. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to get back into that because I feel like that's something I've been really missing this summer. But I just it was too hard to work into my summer schedule because everything is so crazy. But yeah, I'm excited.
I'm excited for you. That'll be fun. As for me, what have I been up to? You said something and I was like, oh my gosh, I totally should talk about that. Summer lessons, working like crazy. What have I been doing? I don't know.
Have you ever had a dream?
Yeah, have you? You're right. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this summer I've been trying to stay busy with doing stuff that like gets me outside, but it's kind of like what you mentioned. It's like I feel like too at the same time I just throw so many things into my schedule sometimes that it's like okay, and then it goes by pretty quickly. But yeah, I've just been keeping with my reading and my gaming, and besides that, there was totally something that I was going to talk about. What happened? I don't know. That's okay. It's gone now.
It'll come back to you next week, maybe.
Maybe it will. But you know what? Instead of just sitting here and listening to me ponder my thoughts for like 10 minutes, maybe we should get into our wheel of questions.
Absolutely. All right, let's spin. If you had to use one word to describe who your life has been shaped by thus far, who would it be?
Like a person? Who has shaped my life? You go first.
Oh, okay, sorry. I actually read the question completely wrong.
Okay, I was like, I don't know how to answer that question. I will need context.
If you had to use one word to describe how your life has been shaped thus far, what would it be?
Oh, okay. One word.
So, like, would you say, like, adversary or, grief or trauma or, like, easy,
Okay.
Roller coaster, crazy. I'm trying to think of more words that have any meaning.
That relatable. If I had to think about a word that describes my life and how it's been shaped up to this point, I would say, I don't know, is there a specific word that would describe uniquely challenging? I'm drawing a blank.
I feel like you could say uniquely challenging. I'll count that as a word.
Okay, that'll be my word that's not a word of choice. Because it feels accurate.
Mm-hmm. I would say for mine, I don't know. That's hard. That's really hard. I wrote this question. I'm like, oh fuck, that's tough because I don't know. I have nothing.
If I was to just try to think of a word to describe your life from an outside perspective, I would say goal-orientated.
Yeah. I would agree. Okay, I'll go goal-orientated.
Because that's like broad or too, right? It's not necessary. Like, you are ambitious, for example, but I feel like sometimes ambitious gets conflated with like other things where it's like, you know, being like passionate or driven. And not that you're not those things, but I just don't feel like they really encompass how you lead with your life. Like, I feel like you typically lead with being goal orientated.
I like a challenge.
Yeah, see?
I'll say challenging as my word, because that can be taken in many ways.
Facts. And also, yes, I will accept that as well. That feels accurate.
There we go. We got there eventually. Let's spin for our next question.
Clearly, Jen and I need another cup of coffee for today's episode.
I know. I'm only drinking sparkling water, and I feel like that's a choice.
Mine's a sugar-free ginger ale, which 0 caffeine.
Do you think you're a good teacher? Or
like
could be a good teacher in the right situation?
I like to think so. But also at the same time, maybe not. Like, I feel like being a teacher means being, like, wise in the different ways that people learn. And I don't know if I'm necessarily that, if that makes any sense.
Do you think you would have the ability to mentor someone in something? I
think being a mentor is one thing, because that would be that somebody is seeking me out for something specific that they know that I can do, that they want to learn from, which makes sense to me. I think I'd be able to work with that. Not so much the necessarily being a teacher, because I feel like the roles are slightly different, or the expectations are slightly different.
I don't know about that. I think there's a teaching aspect to mentorship, right? Like, I'm not necessarily meaning like a school teacher or like a university teacher. I mean, like, you can teach someone to do something in pretty much any situation. That's
fair. What about yourself? What do you think?
I think I am a good teacher, but I think my patience needs work.
That's fair. And you know what else?
If I'm being honest. Yeah. I'm not the most patient person. And that's a character flaw.
I like that. That's good. That's good. That's fun.
All right. On that note, now that we've concluded this interview, let's just spin for our next question. Who has been the most influential figure in your life thus far?
Influential figure in my life. I don't really know if I have one. Like, I don't necessarily look at how other people live and fashion my life after it. I kind of more so just do, like, I don't know. If there's, like, a way where it's like, oh, you know, I see aspects of how people live and I kind of work with that, I would say that. But I don't necessarily have one person where I'm like, I need to be like them.
I agree with you. Do you feel like you've ever had a mentor type figure in your life who really did help shape at least some aspect of where you are now?
Oh, sure. Like, I feel like, for example, with kind of the work that I do, like, there was definitely a learning curve to being able to get to there. That does also involve personal work, like inner work at the same time as, like being a human being that doesn't do crazy shit all the time while also still learning what it is that I need to do. And I do feel like, you know, my husband would definitely have been somebody who mentored me in that process. So I would say that, but I don't know if I would necessarily look at it as, you know, I'm trying to fashion myself after him in a way. More like in the way of somebody showing you the ropes, I guess, type mentorship.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I've had a few different mentors over the years, and I feel like all of them have been influential in different ways. But yeah, I don't think I have like one specific person that I would attribute as to being so like, you know how like in like those like movies about like high school or middle school where they're like, oh, this teacher changed the course of my life. I don't have that.
Yeah, I don't really have that either.
But yeah, all right. Well, let's spin for our final question.
All right.
What would it take for you to leave your current career?
What would it take?
For you to be like, fuck this, I've had enough, I'm doing something completely different.
I think, because I do a lot of different things, so that's kind of like maybe I'd have a different opinion if I really only did like one specific thing with my job. But I feel like for me, at least in my experience with like some of the things that I've done for work, where on the days where I've been like, that's it, I've had enough, I'm not ever going to do this again. It's like, honestly, most stuff dealing with people. I feel like it's really tough if you're trying to accomplish something and either people aren't on your team or you're, whatever, there's some kind of conflicts happening like that. So I don't know. I think for me to be totally done with something, it would need to be like, I've done everything I can in that situation, but because of people, I just can't get it done. That would be enough, I think, for me to just be like, you know what? That's it. I've done what I can. You people suck. I'm out of here.
I'm writing the resume as we speak.
Exactly. Like that would, I think, would be mine.
Fair. I think mine would be similar. Because anytime I've ever thought about changing my career, it's because someone's done something to really offend me and like make my job harder.
Yeah.
And then I like, browse jobs on LinkedIn for a little bit and then, talk myself out of it.
Exactly. So it's like, I don't know, like I feel like if you're somebody who doesn't objectively have an issue with the physical work that you do, it becomes more of a question of like the people you're with, I think. Yeah, right?
Yeah. But that's the end of our questions. What do you think my story's about today?
God. A man is offended.
Correct.
He does a crime.
Correct.
And then the time, but does not feel bad about it.
You're close. You're close.
I was trying to be vague.
You're pretty close. I would give you like 80%.
Oh, hey, I'll take it. That never happens, so.
Well, it only happens when you're vague.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it gets too tempting sometimes for me to.
It's true.
To make a bigger story, but for this one, I am actually a little confused on to what the story could possibly be. So.
All right, well, let's jump right on into it then. Today we're talking about Nicholas Glenn Paul Gumbel, better known as Nicky, and he was born on April 28, 1955 in London, England, to a family shaped by exile, survival, ambition, and professional success. His father, Walter, was a German secular Jew from Stuttgart whose license to practice law had been revoked during the Nazi regime. Walter was forced to flee Germany and eventually immigrated to Britain, where he rebuilt his life and became a successful lawyer. Nicky's mom, Muriel, was also a lawyer who was described as a nominal Christian. Nicky attended Hill House School in Knightsbridge before moving to Eton College, one of Britain's most prestigious boarding schools, and from there he studied law at Trinity College in Cambridge, joining class of 1976. In 1974, while still attending university, Nicky converted to Christianity. That conversion would later become one of the foundational stories repeated throughout Alpha and his ministry. Nicky later recalled reading the New Testament and becoming overwhelmed by what he encountered. He said, quote, "I could not believe what I was reading. I was so struck by it, by the story of Jesus, his character, his words, his parables. It just had the ring of truth." During the same period, Nicky attended a evangelical holiday camp founded by E.J. Bash Nash, And these camps specifically targeted boys from elite English public schools and were designed to prepare future Christian leaders for positions of influence within the Church of England. Decades later, the camps became overshadowed by revelations of sexual and physical abuse perpetrated by John Smith, which sounds like a fake person, but I think is a real guy.
Okay. I was going to say, is that a placeholder name? I guess not.
Nope.
Okay.
Smith is spelled Smyth.
Oh, like Smythe, almost.
Yeah.
Neat.
John Smythe.
All right.
Following these revelations, Nicky reportedly distanced himself from the movement and later removed a eulogy to Nash from newer editions of his devotional book Bible in 1 Year, replacing it with a dedicated to church leader John Collins. After graduating from Cambridge, Nicky initially followed his father's footsteps and became a practicing lawyer. At the same time, however, he became increasingly involved with Holy Trinity Brompton Church in Knightsbridge, the church that would later become inseparable with this movement called Alpha. In January 1978, he married his wife Pippa at Holy Trinity Brompton. Together, they would have 3 children, and in 1982, Nicky announced he was leaving the legal profession entirely in order to train for ordination in the Church of England. In 1983, he began theological training at Wycliffe Hall in Oxford, and by 1986, he had been ordained as a deacon in the Church of England. After reportedly struggling to secure a curacy placement, he eventually joined the staff at his home church of Holy Brompton, aka HTB. 1 year later, in 1987, he was ordained as a priest, and at the time, very few people could have predicted the scale of influence that would eventually emerge from HTB. So, in 1990, Nicky took over leadership of this thing called the Alpha Course, which had already existed in some form since 1977. The Alpha Course presented itself as non-pressured, fun, and informative course where people could share their thoughts and explore the meaning of life. Participants gathered for meals, listened to talks on Christianity, joined small discussion groups, and eventually attended emotionally charged retreat weekends focused heavily on the Holy Spirit. At first glance, it seemed harmless, but critics would later argue that something appeared deeper and more psychologically powerful was happening inside those rooms. Under Nicky's leadership, Alpha transformed from a program aimed at new Christians into something much broader and far more ambitious. These courses became specifically designed for outsiders, skeptics, agnostics, and people who would not normally think of themselves as Christians at all, and that transformation changed everything. So, Holy Trinity Brompton itself developed an almost mythic reputation in London. The church attracted politicians, media figures, bankers, Oxford and Cambridge graduates, young professionals, and wealthy Londoners seeking for purpose beyond material success. Observers repeatedly described the congregation as unusually polished and attractive. One writer described seeing, quote, big-teethed men with flushed cheeks and girls in pink pashminas and blonde hair with surging hormones and tons of money. Is that the kind of place you'd like to go, Em?
Sounds like, maybe a little bit of ecstasy and sex are rocking around. Is rocking around the building a little bit.
If someone described me as a big-toothed person, I'd be so pissed off. I'd be like, hello,
100%.
They're perfect, dainty, cute.
How about if somebody looked at you and you're like, look at you with your pashmina and rushing hormones? I'd be like,
whoa.
We just went 0 to 100, fellas. Like, what are we talking about?
So, meanwhile, the atmosphere inside HTB was intensely emotional. Contemporary Christian worship music filled the church. People openly cried, raised their hands, and described overwhelming encounters with God. During Alpha weekends, many participants reportedly spoke in tongues, which I feel like for me, that's when things start getting dicey. When people are speaking in tongues, I'm like, okay, we feel like we may have crossed a line somewhere here.
Yeah, and it's such a weird thing for background reference, Jen and I grew up Roman Catholic, and things like that aren't necessarily discussed really as far as like, our denomination that we would have grown up with. So it's like, yeah, when you start getting into the territory of speaking in tongues or like it kind of gives with it the tone of like what's it called? I know
Manic.
there was, yeah, like a little bit, and then it's like to me it starts giving to like whatever that I don't know if this is a story we talked about or not, but people, they're like, I'll survive the bite of a rattlesnake or whatever, and then it's just it does give a very particular tone, and not necessarily saying it's wrong. I understand that there are people who this is kind of their vibe, but it does lead to, I think, a more unpredictable nature of whatever it's evolving into.
I would agree with that. So to believers, this represented spiritual awakening. To skeptics, it looked disturbingly close to emotional conditioning and a little culty.
Yes.
We're definitely getting towards cult behavior. So the tension between those two interpretations would follow Alpha everywhere it went. As Alpha exploded internationally through the 1990s and early 2000s, Nicky became increasingly the unmistakable public face of the movement. One observer described him as resembling a Weberian charismatic leader, emphasizing the role his personality and communication style played in Alpha's success. Which, classic cult leader vibes right there.
Yep, you've got the charisma, and you've got the face of the unit.
At the same time, Nicky built a Maber.
He did.
What the fuck am I saying? He built a Maber.
Yep, he sure did.
From Cars.
You know what that is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He built a major publishing career connected directly to Alpha's theology and messaging. His book, Questions of Life, reportedly sold more than 1 million copies and was translated into dozens of languages after being voted, quote, Christian Book of the Year in 1994. Other books followed, including Why Jesus?, Searching Issues, Telling Others, A Life Worth Living, Challenging Lifestyle, Heart of Revelation, and 30 Days. The message inside Alpha centered around spiritual emptiness in modern life. Again and again, participants heard variations of the same theme. Money, status, career success, material comfort could never truly satisfy the human soul. And that message resonated deeply in post-2008 London after the financial collapse shattered many young professionals' faith in corporate ambition and material success. One of the most important figures in the controversy surrounding Alpha was novelist Alex Preston. After becoming a writer, Alex had worked as an investment banker in the 2000s financial boom. Later, he described seeing people wandering through London finance with this, quote, dead look in their eyes. Alex eventually attended an Alpha course himself and became fascinated by the environment surrounding HTB. He published a book called The Revelations, a novel centered around a fictional evangelical church and religious program that many readers immediately connected to HTB and Alpha. The fictional church in the novel was called St. Blothoff's instead of Holy Trinity Brompton. The evangelical program was called The Course instead of Alpha. The church in the novel was packed with wealthy young Christians, Oxbridge graduates, politicians, financiers, and attractive professionals. The charismatic priest leading it, David Nightingale, strongly resembled Nicky in both style and public image. Participants in the course shared meals together, listened to talks, attended worship services, and eventually went away on emotionally intense retreats where they were encouraged to surrender themselves to the Holy Spirit and speak in tongues. Then the darker elements began emerging. According to Alex's quote-unquote fictional description. Course leaders carefully monitored participants. Members were pressured to recruit others. Leaders became obsessed with expansion, image, and growth. Characters repeatedly warned one another to stay silent for, quote, the sake of the course. The fictional leader David Nightingale himself becomes consumed with influence, success, and proudly declaring, quote, I've built something astonishing here. The fictional course evolves into something all-consuming, a social ecosystem where friendships, dating, spirituality, and identity all become tangled together. Then comes the central mystery in Alex's novel. A young woman disappears, and according to the fictional story, her disappearance is quietly covered up because nobody wants anything to threaten the growth and reputation of the course. Reviewers immediately began debating whether Alex had written this disguised critic of Alpha itself, and some readers insisted the novel exposed genuine hidden dangers inside highly structured evangelical movements. Others argued that Alex had fundamentally distorted what Alpha actually was. So, one writer who personally attended Alpha pushed back strongly against the cult comparisons. He admitted that HTB could sometimes feel overly polished, image-conscious, and marketing-driven. He acknowledged that there was sometimes pressure to produce dramatic conversion stories that could be used as testimonies. After completing Alpha, the writer himself was asked to publicly share his testimony on stage. Before walking out in front of hundreds of people, Nicky reportedly instructed him, quote, think of it like a detergent advert. Before, dirty shirt. Then Alpha, now clean shirt. The writer later admitted the experience, quote, left a bad taste in his mouth, and he worried there was a danger of turning complicated spiritual journeys into a simplistic advertisements for Alpha. Still, despite those criticisms, he strongly rejected the idea that HTB was a cult. An anonymous writer argued that Alpha differed fundamentally from manipulative organizations because it focused openly on Jesus from the beginning. The course was free. Participants were not aggressively chased if they dropped out. Journalists could attend openly and could even criticize the program without retaliation. And most importantly, he insisted that Nicky himself was nothing like the controlling frictional priest David Nightingale. Humble Gumbel, he wrote. He is not an egotist or a narcissist. According to him, Nicky lived modestly, rode a bike, and lacked the authoritarian personality often associated with cult leaders, but criticism continued growing from other directions. Some focused on Alpha's theology and social teachings, especially around sexuality and homosexuality. A 2002 critique by the Gay and Lesbian Humanist Association accused Alpha materials of portraying homosexuality as sinful and healable. But I think that's kind of a problem within a lot of, that's not unique to Alpha.
No, I would say that's pretty common amongst the more, we'll call them...
religious.
Yeah, traditional conservative type religions.
So critics pointed to passages where homosexuality was discussed alongside sexual immorality and described as something acquired or learned. One fictionalized speech in the Revelations has David Nightingale warning, quote, some of the most depressed, disappointed people I know are those who chose to be gay or in their younger years and realized it too late that it is a dead-end lifestyle. Which is just not true. Objectively, not true.
That's a choice into saying that. See, for me, it always is like interesting when people talk about like dead end lifestyles, because it's like, yeah, you're opening up a can of worms, which is that anybody can do that. That's not really a sexuality based conviction.
Also, if it's not the life that you're living, why do you care?
Right.
Just saying. Other critics focused less on theology and more on emotional dynamics. One skeptical attendee described arriving at an Alpha retreat and feeling unnerved by how isolated and controlled the environment seemed. The retreat location reportedly felt, quote, heavily guarded. During worship sessions, people cried, collapsed, and spoke in tongues while others prayed over them. To believers, these moments represented profound encounters with God. To outsiders, they resembled coercive group psychology. The accusations became serious enough that the secular organizations publicly challenged Alpha's growing influence. When ITV aired a 10-week television series called Alpha, Will It Change Their Lives?, critics from the National Secular Society accused the network of effectively broadcasting, quote, a 10-hour advertisement for the Alpha course. Even within the Church of England, resentment simmered. Some Anglican clergy mocked Alpha as, quote, naughty theology, accusing it of reducing Christianity to emotional experiences and simplistic answers. Yet Alpha only continued growing. By the 2000s and 2010s, the movement had spread across more than 169 countries and over 30,000 churches worldwide. It appeared in prisons, universities, churches, and massive conferences. Politicians, celebrities, and senior church leaders openly endorsed it. And then, in one of the strangest twist of events, Nicky himself publicly warned churches about what he described as an actual dangerous cult operating in London. He's like, listen guys, this thing I'm doing, not a cult, but there is a cult in London.
I love the misdirection, like, listen guys, I know you think I'm so suspicious and I do cult things, but you'll never guess that there's an actual cult here, and it's not what I'm doing. You just have never heard about it before, and I'm telling you.
In an email reported by the Daily Telegraph, Nicky and his wife Pippa warned churches about a group called Para Christo, which they said was connected to the South Korean organization Shincheonji, led by Lee Man-hee. Quote, as followers became more dedicated, the email warned, they are taught that Lee Man-hee is the advocate and the new John who is to be worshipped. Nicky described the organization as deceptive and potentially dangerous, which is pretty fucking ironic coming from him, seeing as for years critics accused Alpha of cult-like tendencies, and now he's warning against the exact behavior that...
Yeah, he's magically obtained a bunch of knowledge about a cult in England.
Yeah. So supporters argued the difference was obvious. Alpha was transparent, mainstream, and officially endorsed by churches across the world, and critics argued the similarities in recruitment style, emotional intensity, and tightly bonded social structures still deserved scrutiny. As time passed, Alpha became increasingly institutionalized and normalized. Millions of people completed the course globally, and by the time Nicky announced that he was stepping down as vicar of HTB, Alpha had become one of the most successful evangelical outreach programs in modern Christian history. In his farewell remarks to the congregation, Nicky reflected to his decades at the church, saying, quote, "We've been here 46 years since 1976, and we all love you." He told the congregation, "I believe the best is yet to come." Supporters celebrated his legacy enthusiastically. Evangelical leaders praised Nicky and his wife for decades of faithful ministry without any hint of scandal, allegedly. And others described the couple as models of integrity, kindness, and Christian leadership. In 2024, Nicky was appointed Commander of the Order of the British Empire, or CBE, in the New Year honors for services to the Church of England. To supporters, his life represented the story of a respected priest who helped revitalize Christianity for a modern generation, but to critics, Alpha still occupied an uncomfortable gray area between community, conformity, faith, and psychological influence. So, beneath all the debates surrounding theology, sexuality, charismatic worship, and church politics, one issue continued to surface again and again. People could not actually agree on what Alpha was. To supporters, it was the most successful Christian outreach program in history. To critics, some of its methods felt uncomfortably close to emotional conditioning and social conformity, aka a cult, and part of Alpha's power appeared to come from the kind of environment it created. Participants did not simply attend lectures and leave. They ate meals together, they sat in small groups, discussed deeply personal questions about guilt, purpose, forgiveness, fear, relationships, and death, and many attendees arrived during periods of uncertainty or transition in their lives. Some were spiritually curious, others were emotionally exhausted by careers, loneliness, addiction, failed relationship, or the pressures of modern life. Nicky often framed the course around this sense of emptiness in contemporary culture, saying, quote, we are all looking for meaning. And one fictionalized version of his teachings declared in the Revelations said, quote, I feel many of us here feel that there is something wrong with the modern world. What our age is one of greed and grasping and selfishness. We need a new way of living, a new way of negotiating life. That message resonated strongly with like professional people in London, and especially after the financial collapse in 2007 and 2008. Alex, who had worked in banking before becoming a novelist, described seeing people in the city after the crash with that dead look in their eyes and having nothing to fall back on, adding that a lot didn't even know their families. At HTB, Alpha appeared to offer an alternative to that emptiness. The church was filled with attractive young people and successful people, and one observer described the atmosphere as affluent and had intensely social and expensive cars parked outside and well-connected London professionals filling the pews. So, the emotional atmosphere inside of Alpha was also very different from what many people associated with traditional angelicalism. I can't say that word anymore. Angelicalism.
Okay.
One attendee described the retreat experience by writing, quote, the whole notion of giving your life to Jesus and getting saved is raised, with people going up in front of the chapel and praying in a sort of Christianity pledge, with people collapsing and doing the speaking in tongues thing. To supporters, these moments represent a genuine spiritual transformation, and critics disagreed. And some critics argued that Alpha's structure created subtle social pressures. The weekly meetings, the intense friendships, like there was just a lot of emotional vulnerability and kind of emotional manipulation involved.
Right.
And one writer compared certain aspects of Alpha to Landmark Education, a controversial self-improvement organization, saying both movements focused heavily on testimony recruitment, group reinforcement. Some criticized the, quote, insidious marketing of Alpha as the definitive expression of the Christian faith. At the same time, defenders of Alpha insisted these accusations fundamentally misunderstood both the course and Nicky himself. Supporters emphasized that Alpha was free, it was open to skeptics, and that it was fully connected to mainstream Christianity. They argued that participants were never isolated from society, financially exploited, or cut off from family members, which are characteristics commonly associated with genuine cults. Still, even some defenders acknowledged that there were aspects of the movement that could feel a bit much. One supporter admitted that HTB could sometimes become, quote, a little too nice and clean cut. Another acknowledged that Alpha occasionally risked becoming, quote, a slick marketing machine where the fishing feels a little industrial. Which I think is a complaint that a lot of people have about the mega churches as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. There's definitely similarities, I would say, between what they're doing and kind of what mega churches have borrowed as kind of like their campaign.
So the tension surrounding Alpha ultimately came from the fact that there were people often observing the exact same events and reaching completely different conclusions. One person saw emotional healing, another saw emotional manipulation, one person saw spiritual awakening, and another didn't. To critics, the very things that made Alpha successful were exactly what made it unsettling. The attractive and charismatic leaders, the emotionally charged worship, the retreat weekends, the strong group identity, the emphasis on transformation, the certainty that participants had found, quote unquote, the truth. The debate surrounding Nicky and Alpha never centered around hidden compounds, criminal conspiracies, or secret rituals. It centered around influence, emotional belonging, and belief. It became a larger argument about whether the line exists between passionate faith and psychological persuasion, and whether movements built around intense emotional connection can ever completely avoid accusations of control.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, Em? Is it a cult or no?
I think that there's the line between churches or any sort of religious organization and cults kind of gets muddied a little bit sometimes, I think, because
Yeah.
well, it's an interesting thing, right? Like, so you have people who are of a particular belief or whatever who gather, and people obviously have different opinions on what that manifestation looks like, and then you have a pastor or somebody, a religious leader in a position where their job is to kind of basically create the narrative on what it is that people are doing while they're there. And there's definitely social implication with that where I believe anyways that there's going to be certain people who are drawn to certain types of things, or there's certain communities that form. In this case, like, it would make sense for somebody to have an affluent focus on a religious program that they are creating, and it sounds like the leader has a background in, like, law of some kind and some of these other things. So I don't know, it's like it's kind of what you mentioned earlier. It's one thing, I think, that if you're kind of meeting for, like, belief reasons, sharing theology, dispersing stories, giving lessons, whatever you want to call it. It's another when you have people getting together and it's a tight-knit group where, people are acting in certain types of ways, whether that's speaking in tongues or, like, other sort of behavior focused commitments, I would say, within an organization where things like that don't happen unless there is a social perpetuation that is either acceptable or that is what people are looking for. It's a tough one, I think, because there's nothing inherently wrong necessarily with people who choose to worship in that kind of way, because, like I said, there's people all over the world who do different types of things for different types of reasons, and I'm not going to knock any of them because we're all just, people at the end of the day trying to live. But, like, there is, I would say, as a religious leader, an aspect of control. I think ignoring that part of what makes these associations run is short-sighted. What that person is necessarily doing with that type of control is absolutely another conversation. Like, I don't particularly like this, like, pointing fingers at other cults or whatever and being like, you're so worried about what I'm doing, but there's a real cult here. And it's like, okay, but then, like, it's kind of like what we talked about before. There's going to be a lot of different parallels between, like, cults that are, like, New Age cults and people doing New Age religion or New Age whatever, right? Like, it's unfortunately going to be similar in a lot of ways, but that is also in part why cults exist in the way that they do. Because they're taking advantage of that aspect of what people want, which is connection to their community, connection to something bigger than themselves, connection to, parts of
God.
themselves. Yeah, and, like, you know what I mean? So it's tough. I feel like in regards to your story and if it's a cult story or not, I would say that unless I had more information about, like, the inner workings, I guess, on what it is this leader is necessarily doing, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of from an outside perspective and from, like, the logistical standpoint of how things are happening, it does kind of just read like a very passionate evangelical, like, church of a kind. But then again, at the same time, it's like, a lot of cults kind of read the same way until people kind of came out with more information. So
that's my exact thought. It rides that line, which is fine. Until we know more, it's hard to say. Yeah. Until somebody says something, it's like you'll never know if they're crossing that line.
Exactly. And that's also why, too, I was like, the social part to me is a little bit of a red flag, because if you were, say, running an organization that you didn't want people really expressing what was going on behind closed doors, then you would do that through social coercion. So, is that the case? again, hard to say.
We
It's
won't
only
know.
coercion if people disagree with what is happening. So, you know?
Yeah. But that's my tale for you today.
Dang. Dang, dog, that's a loaded one.
An interesting one. This one's been on my list for a while, and I avoided telling it because it is kind of one of those kind of more questionable, is it actually a cult or not? But I thought it was interesting, so I decided to share.
Yeah, I would say I still am in the gray, like, on if, like, I can't just sit here and be like, it is or it isn't. I will say, strong potential.
Yes.
It may not be there. Like, truthfully, from what, like, where we're sitting, it may not be there yet, but it definitely has strong potential.
To get there at some point.
Yes.
Yes. All right, well, that's it today. Do you want to do our closing notes?
I thought you said, do you want to go next? And I was like, ah!
I'm not ready.
But yes, welcome to the end of our episode, or goodbye to the end of our episode, I guess. If you liked today's episode, please make sure to leave us a review on wherever you're listening to our podcast. We do also have our Patreon, which is Wheel of Crime at Patreon. We have our website, which is www.wheelofcrime.com. You can check us out on there. We have our email, which is wheelofcrime@gmail.com. We have our social media, which is Wheel of Crime on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok, all at Wheel of Crime. And guess what, guys? Next week is going to be our listener episode. There is, I believe, still time. If you listened to today's episode and you were like, I want to talk about all the hot people at this weird church, you can go on to our social media. We do have a listeners forum up on all of our social media, and you can click on that. You can submit your story and potentially get a feature on next week's listener episode, which we are so pumped. We are so happy to be able to read your guys' stories. They're so fun. So join us next week and get to listen to a little bit of what you guys, our listeners, have been up to.
Yes, and that's it. That's all. We'll see you next week for a super spooky summer listener story episode. Okay, bye.
Bye.